Let me tell you what happened when I was just trying to leave the hospital after visiting my grandfather. My grandfather had been admitted to the largest hospital in our state about 2 weeks ago. He'd fallen in his garden and broken his hip, which at his age of 78 was pretty serious. The doctor said he was doing well, but he'd need to stay for observation a bit longer, so I've been visiting him every other day. This hospital is notorious for being confusing to navigate. It's like someone designed it specifically to make visitors get lost. There are at least 8 different wings, each with its own set of elevators, and finding your way around is a nightmare. The wait times for elevators are ridiculous too, sometimes up to 10 minutes during busy periods. After spending a couple of hours with my grandfather, I headed out. I was tired and just wanted to get home. I made my way to the main elevators and pressed the down button. Then I waited and waited and waited. 5 full minutes passed before I heard the distinctive ding of an arriving elevator. When the doors opened, I was greeted by the sight of 2 very large men standing shoulder to shoulder, arms folded across their chests. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stared at me. Every instinct in my body was screaming danger, and I immediately thought of all those true crime shows I'd been watching lately. I nervously told them I'd catch the next elevator. They didn't respond. The doors closed and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So there I was, waiting again. This time it took almost 10 minutes before another elevator arrived. When it finally did, there were 3 women inside. One of them stepped out, leaving 2 remaining inside. I exclaimed in relief that finally an elevator had come. I rushed forward, trying to get in before the doors started closing. The 2 women just stood there watching me as I ran. Neither of them made any move to hold the door open or press the button to keep it from closing. The doors began to shut just as I reached them. I stuck my hand in to trigger the sensor, but instead of reopening like they're supposed to, the doors kept trying to close. On my hand, I frantically asked them to press the door open button. The women just stared at me as I started to panic. My hand was caught, and I couldn't pull it out. The door kept pressing against my wrist, and all I could think was, what would happen if the elevator started moving with my hand still stuck in it? One woman coldly remarked that it wasn't their problem. The other one added that I should have been faster. I was pulling and twisting, trying desperately to free my hand while these 2 just watched. The open door button was right there, literally inches from where one of them was standing. Finally, with one hard yank, I managed to pull my hand free, leaving about a 4-inch gap where the doors couldn't fully close. My hand was red and starting to bruise, but at least I was free. Then came the satisfying part. The doors kept trying to close but couldn't because of the gap. They'd close, hit the obstruction, open slightly, and try again. This cycle repeated several times before the elevator made a grinding noise and stopped trying. I heard one of the women asking what was happening and why they weren't moving. The other suggested pressing another floor. I heard buttons being pressed frantically, but nothing happened. The first woman complained that now they were stuck. The second one suggested trying the closed door button again. More button pressing, more nothing happening. The first woman expressed frustration about being late. The second woman suggested pressing the emergency call button. I heard the distinct buzz of the emergency call being activated, followed by a tinny voice responding. The emergency operator asked about their emergency. The second woman explained they were stuck in elevator 3 in the east wing and that the doors wouldn't close. The operator told them that they could see the issue, an obstruction in the door, and would need to send a maintenance team to reset the elevator, which could take about 30 minutes. The first woman yelled in outrage about the wait time, saying they didn't have 30 minutes to spare. When they were having their meltdown, another elevator arrived. I stepped in, rubbing my sore hand, and pressed the button for the parking level. I told them to have a nice wait as my elevator doors closed. As my elevator descended, I could still hear them arguing with the emergency operator, blaming everyone but themselves for their predicament. All of this could have been avoided if they'd just pressed a button to hold the door open for me. Basic human decency isn't that hard. But I guess for some people, it's just too much effort. When I got to my car, I called my grandfather to tell him what happened. He laughed so hard I thought he might hurt his hip again. My grandfather told me this was what he called instant karma. He added that you can't fix entitled people, but sometimes the universe does it for you. See, I teach this course they call college math at the local community college. It's basically pre-algebra. Nothing fancy, just the fundamentals to get these young folks ready for the real deal. I put my whole heart into it, trying to be that positive, supportive teacher everyone deserves. Most of my students are in their 20s and 30s, working hard to better themselves, and I respect that hustle. Now, teaching math ain't always smooth sailing. Plenty of my students struggle with concepts like solving systems of equations by substitution. That's why I run these little tutoring sessions after class. Most who need the help show up, but there's this one student, let's just call her Miss Entitled, who never bothers to come despite needing it the most. This girl acts like she's God's gift to mathematics. I'll be in the middle of showing the class how to work through a problem, and she'll cut me off like I'm some background noise. She'll go on about how her father says my methods are wrong, or she'll question why I'm teaching at a community college instead of the university, implying I must have done something wrong to end up here. Like I'm some kind of failure because I chose to teach at a community college. That kind of talk stings, but I try to keep it professional. Last week we had an exam, and about half the class knocked it out the park with 90% or better. Most others got B's and C's. Now I know many students here are riding on scholarships, sports, hardships, you name it. When I see someone bombing a test, sometimes I'll grade on a curve to give them a fighting chance. That's exactly what I did for Miss Entitled. She would have failed hard, but I bumped her up to an 18 out of 25, a solid 72%. I even overlooked another major mistake that would have dropped her score even lower. Part laziness on my part, part kindness. I'm not saying the ratio was equal, you feel me? When I handed back the graded tests, Miss Entitled starts up with her usual nonsense. She wanted to see what she got wrong on the test, claiming she definitely didn't miss that much. I tried to hint that she should be satisfied with the score I gave her, using my tone to suggest she was lucky to have that 18. But instead of taking the lifeline I'm throwing her, this girl stands up, marches over, and points her finger right in my face. She started shouting that I can't just put whatever grade I want, claiming that 18 out of 25 wasn't even possible. She went on about needing to keep her grade point average high for her scholarships and demanded I grade her test accurately. Now I'm all about keeping my cool, but something in me just snapped. You want accurate? Baby, I'll serve you up some accuracy that'll make your head spin. I knew for a fact this girl didn't deserve anywhere near that 72%. She didn't master the content, didn't get the questions right. When I grade dozens of tests, I focus on the important questions and make sure those are marked correctly. If I ever make a grading error, it always favors the student. I pulled out her test from my case, looked at it real careful like, and gave her one last chance to back down. She wouldn't budge. I admitted to her that she was right about the errors, even saying I made more than one mistake when grading. I went behind my desk where students couldn't see and graded her paper right then and there. By now I had the answers memorized, but I pulled out the answer key anyway so she'd know I was being thorough. You know, accurate. After a proper grading, she ended up with a 14 out of 25. I changed it in the gradebook and handed the test back to her immediately. That 14 dropped her from a high C to a solid D. She went through that paper with a fine-tooth comb looking for any mistake on my part. Good thing I took a picture of it first. She's tried to alter her answers before. She whipped out her phone to check how this affected her overall grade. The look on her face. I could see the storm brewing. Her eyes welled up, and she got that scary quiet that comes right before something bad. My instincts were screaming that this was about to go south fast. Before she could explode, I offered her a way out. I reminded her about the option to do corrections on the exam for a quarter of the credit back, explaining that would get her almost back to where she was with the original score. I asked what she thought about that idea. She agreed, not looking too happy about it. After corrections, she ended up with a 17.5 out of 25, almost back where she started. She hasn't given me any trouble since, but I'm pretty sure my semester evaluation is gonna take a hit. I live in a pretty nice neighborhood where most people are friendly and look out for each other. I've been here for about 5 years now, ever since I got my first decent paying job after college. I saved up enough for a down payment on a small house. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I work from home as a software developer, which means I'm around the neighborhood more than most. The lady I'll call Karen moved in about 2 years ago. From day one, she made it clear she thought our street belonged to her. She'd complain about everything: kids playing, dogs barking, even the garbage trucks being too loud on collection day. Most of us tried to be understanding at first. Maybe she worked nights, maybe she had sensitive hearing. Nope, she just felt entitled to control everything around her. I should mention that our street has a lot of families with young kids. Before Karen moved in, the kids would play outside all the time, especially during summer break. It was nice hearing their laughter and seeing them having fun like kids should. But Karen started calling the police for noise disturbances whenever the kids played. The officers would show up, see it was just normal kid stuff during daylight hours, and leave. But the damage was done. Parents started keeping their kids inside more. Last weekend was unusually hot, hitting almost 95 degrees. A bunch of neighborhood kids, including my niece and nephew who were visiting, decided to have a water gun fight to cool off. It was around 2 p.m. on a Saturday, a perfectly reasonable time. The kids were having a blast, running around and squealing with delight when they got sprayed. I was sitting on my porch supervising and enjoying seeing them have fun. That's when Karen stormed out of her house with what I can only describe as a military-grade super soaker. This wasn't your regular toy store water gun. This thing had a massive tank backpack and looked like it could knock a kid over. One of the kids asked innocently if she was joining their game. Karen snapped back that she wasn't joining but rather putting an end to it, calling them little monsters and complaining they had been screaming for hours. I stepped in and pointed out that they'd only been playing for about 20 minutes and were just having fun on a hot day. Karen retorted that she worked from home and couldn't concentrate with all the noise. I happened to know this was a lie since she was always doing gardening or washing her car on weekends. I reminded her it was a weekend and that kids were allowed to play outside during daylight hours. Karen got even angrier and declared that they weren't allowed to play on what she called her street. Then, without warning, she started blasting the kids with her super soaker. Now you might think, it's a water fight. What's the big deal? But she was deliberately aiming at their faces, and the pressure on that thing was intense. My nephew, who's only 6, started crying when he got sprayed directly in the eyes. I immediately yelled at her to stop, telling her she was hurting the children. Karen just smugly suggested that maybe they'd learn to be quiet then. My neighbor from across the street came running out when he heard the commotion and asked what was happening. I quickly explained that she was spraying the kids in their faces with her high-powered water gun. Karen defended herself by claiming the children were disturbing the peace and that she had a right to quiet enjoyment of her property. My neighbor was shocked and asked if she was really assaulting children, warning her to back off before he called the police. Karen defiantly told him to go ahead, insisting the kids were the ones breaking noise ordinances. At this point, several other neighbors had come outside. The kids were all huddled behind us adults, soaking wet and scared. Another neighbor spoke up, saying that while they had tolerated her complaints for 2 years, attacking children crossed the line. Karen denied attacking anyone, claiming it was just water. I pointed out that she had deliberately sprayed my nephew in the eyes, and he was crying because it hurt. Karen seemed to realize she'd gone too far, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. She suggested we should teach the kids some manners, and complained that the neighborhood was peaceful before all the people with screaming brats moved in. That comment really got to me because most of these families had lived here long before she arrived. I told her that she was actually the newcomer, and this neighborhood had always been full of families with children playing outside. I added that if she wanted cemetery-level quiet, she should have moved somewhere else. Karen insisted she had just as much right to be there as anyone, and claimed she had the right to peace and quiet. My neighbor countered that her rights didn't come at the expense of everyone else's right to live normally. Karen threatened that we would see about that before storming back into her house, water gun and all. The kids were pretty shaken up, so we ended the water fight and took them inside for popsicles and to dry off. Later that afternoon, a police car pulled up. Karen had actually called the cops on us. The officer looked pretty tired as he approached my porch where several of us adults had gathered. The officer told us they had received a noise complaint about children playing and supposedly someone threatening a resident. We explained what actually happened, and several neighbors had doorbell camera footage showing Karen spraying the kids. The officer sighed and mentioned this was the third call they'd had from her address that month. He said he would go talk to her. We watched as he went to Karen's house. Through the open windows, we could hear her shouting about her rights and how we were all conspiring against her. The officer stayed calm. About 20 minutes later, he came back to update us. He explained that he had told Karen that children playing outside during daytime hours was not a violation of any noise ordinance. He had also warned her that deliberately spraying anyone, especially children, with a high-pressure water gun could potentially be considered assault, particularly if aimed at the face or eyes. I thanked him and asked if he thought she would stop harassing the neighborhood now. The officer was honest with us, saying that, in his experience, people like this rarely change. But he reassured us that she now understood her complaints wouldn't result in any action unless there was an actual problem, and that if she escalated to physical actions again, she could face consequences. For the next few days, it was quiet. Karen stayed inside her house, though we could see her watching from her windows whenever anyone was outside. We started to hope maybe she'd learned her lesson. Then yesterday, I spotted her talking to a real estate agent in her front yard. This morning, a for sale sign went up. One of the neighbors texted our neighborhood group chat that the Wicked Witch was moving, making a joke about ding-dong like in The Wizard of Oz. I feel a little bad about it. No one should feel forced to move. But at the same time, our neighborhood shouldn't have to tiptoe around one unreasonable person. The kids are already back to playing outside, and the whole street feels lighter somehow. The parents of the kids she sprayed are planning a massive water fight celebration for this weekend. I've already bought extra water balloons to contribute. Sometimes entitled people eventually face consequences for their behavior, and in this case, Karen decided she'd rather leave than adapt to living in a community where children exist and make noise. And honestly, I think we're all going to be much happier without her policing our every move. Senior year was supposed to be my time to shine, but mono knocked me out for nearly 3 months. By the time I returned to school, everything had changed. My plans were ruined, and I was an outsider trying to catch up with classmates who had already formed their social circles. On my first day back, someone whispered about my absence as I entered English class. Mr. English barely acknowledged me, just making a sarcastic comment about keeping up with the material. Lunch was lonely until Miss Popular, the queen bee of the senior class, approached me. She asked to sit with me, which surprised me. Her true intentions became clear when she mentioned my intelligence and pulled out her biology textbook. She admitted to struggling with the subject and asked for my help, saying her aunt and uncle would be upset if she didn't get a good grade. Desperate for friendship, I agreed to help. Our study sessions became regular, and I foolishly believed we were becoming friends. Eventually, I learned that Mr. English was her uncle, but I didn't think much of it at the time. When college application season arrived, I needed 2 recommendation letters. After securing one, I discovered my second option was unavailable. Miss Popular suggested asking her uncle, claiming he was actually nice despite his tough exterior. Mr. English agreed to write the letter but asked me to write a personal essay about myself first. When I asked what to include, he told me to share everything: my goals, challenges, and personal struggles. The letter he eventually gave me was lukewarm and subtly critical. He questioned my academic commitment due to my absence and described my abilities as merely adequate. Thankfully, I had a backup letter from another teacher. The day after mailing my applications, Miss Popular's attitude completely changed. No more friendly lunches or study sessions. Even worse, everyone suddenly knew personal details I had only shared in that essay. She cornered me by my locker and cruelly admitted she never wanted to be friends. She just needed help passing biology. I retreated to the library during lunches and focused on my studies. I received an early acceptance to my top choice university while Miss Popular was still waiting for responses. As finals approached, I discovered she was counting on Mrs. Science's class to boost her GPA for a conditional college acceptance. Mrs. Science had a system where students could do a group project, take a final exam, or both, with a higher grade counting if you did both. I asked to be placed in Miss Popular's group. When she saw the assignments, she smirked and told me I'd be doing all the work while they focused on better things. I agreed with a smile. The day before the project was due, she texted asking about progress, emphasizing they needed an A. I told her I hadn't done the project and would just take the final exam instead. She panicked, saying she needed the grade, but I coldly told her there was nothing she could do. She tried everything that week: apologies, bribes, threats. I ignored it all, studied intensely, and scored a perfect 100% on the final. With no curve to help her, Miss Popular's grade wasn't enough for her conditional acceptance. I later heard she had to take summer classes and wait another year to reapply to college. At graduation, I made sure to walk past Mr. English with my honor cords and acceptance letter visible, thanking him for the recommendation that was exactly what I needed. The look on his face was worth everything I'd endured that year.